Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. We've got a great conversation about to happen around functional foods and beverages. I'm Fred Schonenberg. I'm the founder of Venture Fuel, and I'll be your moderator and host. As humans, our relationship with food has evolved over the years, from first survival to taste, and then fuel, and now medicine. At no time have consumers cared more about what they put in their bodies and the impact that their diets have on their health, their performance, and their recovery. So at Venture Fuel, we help industry-leading organizations by tapping into what's next now. We're running the Real California Milk Accelerator. This is our third year of the program with the California Milk Advisory Board. And this year, our goal is to find startups that are creating these performance and recovery products with milk as their key ingredient. You'll see a link on the screen down below to learn more about it. But at a very top level, we have over $650,000 in prizing and awards to help startups grow their products and help people with both performance and recovery. So applications are open until this Friday night. So please share with anyone you think might be interested, whether they just have an idea for a new product, all the way through to products that are on shelf. Anything under 1 million in sales are eligible to apply. So on to our show today. I'm so excited to welcome to the stage here a triumvirate of leading voices in the functional food and beverage space to talk about consumer trends and the role of dairy in optimizing our health. Elizabeth, I will start with you. This is Elizabeth Crawford, the Deputy Editor of Food Navigator. Elizabeth covers the food and beverage industries, including innovation, startups, health, wellness, nutrition, the FDA, and dietary supplements. Elizabeth, thank you for joining us. Donna Berry is the owner of Dairy and Food Communications, Inc., and editor of Daily Dose of Dairy, focused on innovations in dairy products and related beverages. Donna has been a judge for both of our accelerator programs before, so we're so happy to have you, Donna. And Joel Hastings, editor of Dairy Business News and host of the Dairy Business Podcast. One of my favorite parts of this is getting to talk to Joel whenever we're launching something new and talk about all the innovation happening in dairy. So let's get after it. Elizabeth, can you speak to the momentum around functional within the food and beverage industry? Have you seen more new products emerging in the space? And are there any attributes that seem to be of focus right now?
Yeah, so first of all, thank you for having me. It's an honor to be up here with so many esteemed panelists. I think even before the pandemic, the functional food and beverage space was growing at a pretty fast clip. We saw a lot of interest at that time sort of in functional health in terms of sports fitness and recovery. And then, of course, the pandemic came and accelerated this trend like it did a lot of trends, albeit a little bit unevenly across categories. I think some recent SPINS data that was presented at Expo West last month sort of put the functional foods and beverage category at growing at about 9.4% in the last year. And within this, one of the strongest categories is the functional beverage space. And I think that this is an interesting space for functional because it's really attractive to consumers from a cost point. It's easy to grab one SKU and try it. So it's a low cost barrier. It's a low trial barrier. That said, during the pandemic, without grab and go, because we weren't going, the space saw a little bit of a decline, but we've still seen plenty of innovation in this area, a lot obviously around immunity, a lot around stress reduction. So we're seeing ingredients like ashwagandha pop up and some mushrooms and adaptogens really gaining traction in that regard. And then of course we have the ongoing growth of digestion, which I think we're seeing, consumers are making the connection between a healthy gut and healthy mind and a healthy body. And so again, with the pandemic, really looking to find products that will support digestion so that it supports their overall health.
It's super interesting. And Joel, I'll turn it over to you. From a dairy lens, do you feel that there is added momentum for functional foods and beverages, specifically in the dairy industry?
Well, Fred, thank you. I'm flattered to be with this panel of food experts. My experience has been writing more for dairy producers themselves, But their organizations like DMI that we'll hear about later, their checkoff organization, and dairy producers themselves are much closer to food perhaps than they used to be 10 or 20 years ago. Many producers are involved with artisan food production, traditional products perhaps, but the dairy industry is getting closer and closer to the consumer. At least that's my impression. In terms of the momentum, I would echo what we've just heard, and I think based on the consumer research that we're seeing, as well as the success of products like Fair Life, and then the support for new products such as the CMAB programs, I think really shows that this is on trend, if you will.
Yeah.
I just received a report from a news release issued by IDFA, the dairy processors, and Milk Pep, the organization that promotes fluid milk for processors, talking about the milk as the original superfood. So I think the industry is rallying around this point.
Yeah, that's super interesting. I want to kind of put a pin in that. We'll come back to that in a second, because I think it's very interesting as a delivery mechanism for a lot of the functional areas. And Donna, one of the things I love about your newsletters and your writing is you're always looking at product innovation. So have you seen an influx of these sort of better for you and enhanced products?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me here. I can't wait to actually be in person with all of you and give you big hugs. I'm like craving that interaction. And to answer your question, it has been a very interesting year and a half. I mean, obviously, we all know that dairy was all forms and shapes were selling off of the refrigerator and the freezer. And, again, dairy being the original superfood, it seems that consumers showed us that they know that they appreciate it. And so enhanced products and functional foods, when you're starting with a base ingredient that already has, something like 13 essential ingredients, vitamins and minerals and nutrients, it is amazing. So I think what we've learned in this past year and what we are seeing more of is making these products simpler, cleaner. We talk about bringing it closer to home, closer to the consumer, being made local, and that's very much been appreciated this past year. But where the processors are innovating is in a space that we actually already owned, and we talked about immunity and probiotics. I mean, dairy should have owned probiotics, and we let it get away. So there has been a great deal of emphasis on that and pulling in additional ingredients. There are definitely some very interesting new yogurts in the marketplace that have, again, ingredients for stress relief, and gosh knows I've needed that. Anxiety, sleep aid, something to, and then energy, natural energy. So there's been a lot of activity with caffeinated coffee products, but again, keeping it natural energy and providing the protein and the nutrition. And there has been some activity with demographic specific or products specifically for kids and building immunity that we've seen. And I have a feeling that's going to be really important right now as parents are vaccinated, but the little ones are not. And I know you can relate to that, Fred. So it's like, yep. we have to build their immunity and keep them safe. And something else, which really isn't necessarily functional food, but I think is going to have some activity and really for dairy processors, is this category of upcycled ingredients. We're seeing some, using ugly fruit, and using that in yogurt products. There's ice cream right now, Farmer's Fridge ice cream, which uses fruit that would not be acceptable at the grocery store, and they're putting it into a frozen product. Veggies I think that was a winner last year in an ice cream product. So it's a lot of using what Mother Nature has provided to enhance already what is a beautiful natural product. So
very well said. I think, Elizabeth, one of the things that Donna just mentioned is sort of the clean label. And one of my questions for you, looking more holistically outside of just dairy, Like what tailwinds or headwinds do you see for functional foods? I mean, do consumers want this? Are the nutritional claims or the combinations too much for them to digest? Like, what is your vantage point on that?
Well, I think there's definitely a unique opportunity here with the pandemic, even as it hopefully sort of tapers out, to really seize the momentum of around immunity and around holistic health through food and medicine. But I do think you would need to act now. So really playing up protein and sort of the natural goodness, the natural ingredients, because to your point, I do think we've seen some ingredients in the past year or two overstate their potential, and consumers are smart. They do a lot of research online now, which cuts both ways. One, you don't have to spell out the benefits of protein. You don't have to spell out the benefits of probiotics. You don't have to spell out the benefits of calcium. But what that also means is that if you overstate and you make an ingredient or a product seem like a panacea, consumers will push back and they will leave that. And I think an example of that is in CBD. We're seeing a lot of pullback right now. And where that category lands, I think only time will tell. But that was really presented as this amazing ingredient with all these claims. So I would just caution companies working, especially with dairy, something that's tried and true, to really stick to what is scientifically supported, because consumers are doing that research.
Yeah, that's excellent. I know the second panel, we'll bring in Dr. Slimko to talk a little bit about the science part of it. But yeah, the nutritional claims are often, you get the friction between marketing and actual health claims. Donna, going back to you, it seems like there's a lot of noise in the sort of functional space. I'll call it the vitaminization of everything, right? Like I feel like I could buy orange juice that would keep my hair from falling out. I can't find it to keep it from going gray, right? But I can keep it from falling out. Like, do consumers really want this where every single, like one drink covers everything? I'm just curious your take on that.
Well, first of all, I'd like to know that orange juice because I could use a little bit these days as I'm getting older. You know what? I don't think they want too much in one product. And I think inherent nutrition is something that is really resonating with consumers. The idea of, you say vitaminization, and I actually said that word.
It's hard to say.
It is hard to say. Is it a word even? I don't even know.
Definitely not a word.
But getting the inherent nutrition from what you're putting in. So just this week, Oikos brand, a Danone brand, rolled out a new version of their yogurt where they're saying it's 50% more fruit. It's actually, they're calling it forkable yogurt. That is their big platform, their marketing platform for it. So you don't need a spoon. You can actually use a fork because it's almost like half fruit in there. And that's how you're getting all your, all the vitamins and the natural fiber. So there's a lot of that going on, and it's resonating with consumers. And then adding, again, the real nutrition that you get from things like oats, whole grains, quinoa, chia seed, putting that into the yogurt instead of boosting it with a kick of vitamins and getting the inherent nutrition. So consumers, that resonates with them when they see that it's made with whole food ingredients, I like to say, and getting the nutrition from the whole food ingredients and then from the dairy, and they complement each other.
I love it. Joel, I'm going to ask you a big picture question and then get specific. Do you think that functional foods is a fad or a trend? Like, is this something that's going to stay around and be part of how we eat and drink moving forward?
Well, I'd certainly defer to my colleagues in the food space here, but in my opinion, I've seen lots of signs that this is going to be with us for a while. In my other life, I do consulting work for the California Ag Export Council, which focuses on specialty fruits. And I've been reviewing marketing plans for a number of those products for the Pacific Rim countries, China, Southeast Asia, Korea, Japan, which are big markets on their own, of course, but also for U.S. products. And every single marketing plan began with the notion that those consumers are focusing on the functional benefits of the foods that they are buying and consuming. It was really pretty remarkable. And various surveys and various sources of evidence were cited but it was pretty much unanimous. And while that's perhaps not the U.S., I think it's important for U.S. producers, but I don't really see any reason why those middle class consumers are going to be dramatically different from folks in Europe or North America. Back in January 2020, when we were just talking before we started about attending events, which we haven't been doing, but
right.
Just before the shutdown, I was at a trade show in Japan, and the whole emphasis was on functional aspects of pretty much plant-based foods, beauty within and without. And there was even some dairy there. The camel's milk display was getting a lot of traffic.
Yeah.
So I think this is a trend, not just a quick fad.
I will say to that note, the amount of, I'll call it unique applications we get as part of running this accelerator. We have seen the camel's milk. There's a couple entries this year that have nothing to do with food and beverage, but are better for you products with dairy as the core. So it's very interesting to see the creativity of folks as well.
Sure.
Donna, what about you? Let me put the same question to you. Do you see this functional foods as a fad or a lasting trend?
Well, so I've been writing them for 30 years now. The word functional foods existed 30 years ago. I mean, we've been writing about it. So I think that already takes the word fad off the table. It's a trend, and we just are growing and it's evolving. And it's evolving in a way as to what consumers are willing to accept, and what the law allows us to do probably with these foods. But it's and it was even before that, and it's gone under different names like designer foods, if I can remember correctly. Yeah. Even when I was back at university, there was this concept of designer food. So it's here to stay. And again, I think it's a matter of learning what the consumer is willing to embrace, accept, and believe. And there's a lot that they don't believe in. They've had a lot of time this past year to educate themselves. So it's waters to go through carefully.
Right. Elizabeth, so you cover all sorts of emerging food and beverages. Are there any attributes of dairy that you think make it interesting as this sort of base for whether it's designer foods or functional trends that are kind of coming at us here?
Yeah, I mean, I think dairy has a lot going for it. We've already touched on how it was the original superfood. And I do think that a lot of mainstream consumers in the conventional and in natural, across channels understand that. I mean, most Americans grow up drinking milk at dinner every night because milk does a body good. So I think that is definitely something that is innate to dairy. It's not something that you have to teach as much. And so you have that going for you. But I think there are some other attributes to dairy that are really interesting. I mean, it brings this experience that consumers also crave, right? They want something healthy, but they don't want to trade off in taste or experience. And so as we look, for example, at permissible indulgence, like there's a huge opportunity to use dairy as delivering functional benefits, health benefits, but in a format that not only just isn't compromising, but brings emotional comfort. So some of these high protein, frozen yogurts or ice creams, or if you even think about your morning cup of coffee and adding milk to that so that it doesn't hurt your stomach. And so you also get a little bit of protein there. So I do think there's a lot of attributes that are just innate in dairy. And it's also very well paired with probiotics and prebiotics and helping them get through your gut. So there's a lot to work with there.
I feel like tonight when I serve myself some ice cream, I am going to justify it with permissible indulgence. I like that phrase.
Like one of my favorite trends. I'm right there with
you.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Amen.
Well, Elizabeth, I'm going to stay with you for a second. Do you see any gaps or white spaces on shelf right now? Like if you could launch a product today, and maybe if you're going to, you don't share it. But if just from what you've seen, is there something missing out there, and are there specific attributes that you think are important that would help it become a hit?
Well, first and foremost, I have the utmost respect for anybody playing and innovating in this space. makes my stomach just like tighten up to think about doing it myself. So I will not be entering the space after seeing how competitive it is. But I do think there are a lot of opportunities out there. For as much as I was just joking about permissible indulgence, I think that there is space within dairy specifically for reduced sugar. And we are already seeing that. But this is one of the elements of dairy that sort of works against it, is all the naturally occurring sugars. But we are seeing, like I said, and I think Donna already hinted at some of the innovations that we're seeing here. Earlier this month, Chobani launched a dairy-free yogurt with 0 grams of sugar. So not even just, 0 added grams, but just 0. And so that's a cool innovation. And I think there's a lot more room to play there, especially as we see some more acceptable sweeteners come onto the market for consumers. I think another area that's ripe for innovation, and again, Donna sort of hinted at it, is sort of with older children, so tweens who might be transitioning away from having that glass of dairy at dinner, that aren't, as tweens that have the yogurt tube with the cartoons on it, right? So I think there's a chance there to help them transition because they're not grown-ups yet. They might not want the stuffy, no flavored 5% Greek protein yogurt that I would choose. So I think finding that balance is a great opportunity.
That's awesome. That's a great idea. Donna, what isn't on shelf in the dairy aisle that should be?
So, I mean, one of the spaces that I've repeatedly said that we need to up our game in the US is the refrigerated dairy dessert space. And again, I love the word permissible indulgence. And when you take something, let's just say a overnight oats that's already prepared, or rice pudding, looking at other grains, adding fruits and nuts and seeds to these products, it's still a treat, but it's also providing that providing nutrients. And so I think there's opportunity to expand there and even make it better for you in with other attributes and other additives. Another category where we don't even realize how much it has evolved, but cheese and cheese as snacks. And right now, I mean, we're used to, we were used to string cheese as probably the big snack food. Now we have all the little packs that have, cubes or, even kids' shapes. But then there's the dried cheese snacks that are now shelf stable, 100% cheese that has been baked or dehydrated, and they're poppable, they're crackers, there's sticks, there's bars. I absolutely love one of the cheese bars that has some addition herbs. So where can we take that even further? And can it be a carrier for additional nutrition as well? So, and taking that, could we do that with yogurt? I know that there's baby food yogurt, dehydrated yogurt drops out there. Why can't that even be an adult product? Crunchy with flavors, and again, maybe even fortified with extra vitamins. So, looking at different technologies to, concentrate the nutrition and then, put it into different forms, put dairy into different forms. So break out of that standard of identity and do something fun with it.
I love that. I have to say that we're not allowed to say cheese out loud in my house because my son loves it so much that that's all he wants to eat at any point. So we've gotten very good at spelling cheese. As soon as he learns to spell, we're in a lot of trouble, and we're going to have to figure out a new name. But it's very.
Well, and I'll just say astronaut ice cream. It's dehydrated ice cream pop. So why not some of these high protein ice creams? They become a snack, a non-perishable snack food. Astronaut ice cream. So it's cool.
We'll take this part offline another day, Donna, but I have to tell you my story about going to space camp when I was a teenager. And I had some of that ice cream. It was the only part of the camp that I did well in, dehydrated ice cream. Joel, last question for you. Are there any products that you wish existed as a consumer looking from this sort of functional F&B lens? Is there anything you think should be out there that isn't?
Well, I'm pretty intimidated by the capabilities of my panel colleagues here who live in this space, but and nobody's ever going to accuse me of being too imaginative when it comes to my food. But I think consumers of all ages, including baby boomers like me, when we talk high protein, no added sugar, flavor, texture. We know dairy products just have so much to offer. So products with the benefit of gut health and maybe mental acuity would be appealing. Our friends at Chobani might tell us they're already there. I'll just take a little bit of an offshoot here, Fred, and it traces back to the trade show I attended a year ago, Beauty Without. I wonder if there aren't opportunities for dairy with skincare products and in the multi-billion-dollar cosmetics industry.
Yeah, I think that is a gigantic opportunity. Super interesting. So we've got time for maybe 2 questions, but I'll start with one from the audience. And the question is, how have various recent diets, keto, gluten-free, et cetera, impacted the emerging functional food trends? And what do you think is more or less popular? So I'll start with you, Elizabeth. Basically, how have various recent diets impacted emerging trends?
I mean, they're definitely influential. One thing that I thought was interesting, again, at Natural Products Expo West earlier this month, Spins presented some data showing how these diets actually play very differently across categories. And so I think that's something to keep in mind, is that yes, keto is fantastic for dairy because it fits nicely in there and lots of cheese and not crackers happening. But I think you should do your research and look to see where it's performing well and where it's already oversaturated. And I think that while words like paleo and keto can get you a lot of fast action, a lot of interest in a niche group, if you broaden those out and just talk about the attributes of your product that are healthy, you will reach a much broader consumer base for a longer time. So I think a good example of this is sort of the low carb movement. We've seen it have lots of different names, paleo for one, Atkins, this is all sort of the same core value. And so if you talk about that, you'll reach the people who aren't just looking for the diet of the moment, or who are looking for something that's sustainable long-term for their lifetime.
All right, Donna, I'm turning the same question to you. In high school, I was trying to become a basketball player and needed to be lean because I'm not built that way. And the diet at the time was no fat, or like as little fat as humanly possible. And then I hit my 30s and the same doctors are going, no, opposite, all fat. You want fat. You don't want any carbs. So I would imagine as a food manufacturer that is a dangerous game to chase some of these diets. What are your thoughts on that as sort of an overall driver for the functional space?
Well, I'll just say the word. When I graduated, a food scientist, and I worked at Kraft, and I was working on fat-free cheese at that time. And the words fat-free and cheese do not belong in the same sentence. So that's something where we don't want to go. During as keto started to pick up, it's an interesting factoid that folks who are in the fluid milk business, they couldn't keep creamer stocked on their shelves because the folks on keto diets were drinking glasses of creamer as like you would drink a glass of milk. So, and they didn't have to do anything to say this is, for the keto diet. The consumer was smart enough to recognize that. But to build on this space, you do have to be careful with it. And that's where I think, again, the beauty of dairy is its inherent nutrition, and talk about maybe the different fatty acids that are in dairy fat. We have conjugated linoleic acid. If you're using grass-fed, cream or grass-fed butter and putting that into a coffee fuel type beverage, it's bringing additional nutrition that's inherently present in there. Whereas coconut oil is what also is being used in a lot of keto diets, and that's kind of just saturated fat. It tastes good, but doesn't have all that extra nutrition. So I think I would agree with Elizabeth, is to be careful and to focus on what the product is. Again, I'll say that word inherent, but inherently, again, it's a superfood, and it works. All those components together work best in the body than having them separately. Well,
Donna, Joel, Elizabeth, this has been awesome. Thank you so much for taking the time to share with us There are a lot of great questions in the chat here, so I apologize we did not get to them all. We'll find a way to get you guys some answers to these, but thank you three for taking the time. We really appreciate it.
Hug.
Yeah, virtual hugs. Great. Well, our second panel here is titled Unlocking Functional Benefits Through Product Innovation, and we have a superstar panel here to join us. It's loaded with esteemed experts to share how we're unlocking functional benefits through product innovation. So let me start with you, Michelle. Dr. Michelle Slimko is DMI's Great Nutrition Science Lead, who's focused on areas such as immunity, calm, sleep, stress, inflammation, energy, and digestive health. So this is probably the, her bio basically wrote the whole plan for this conference today. She is the SVP of Nutrition and Environmental Research for the National Dairy Council, where she leads the Innovation Center Sustainable Nutrition Committee, comprised of executives from various dairy companies. Bob Carroll is the VP of Business Development for the California Milk Advisory Board, where he leads a global business development team responsible for increasing demand and sales for dairy products made from California milk all around the world. Previously, Bob's worked in marketing and general management for Blue Diamond Growers and Kraft Foods. Bob has been one of the driving forces behind our California Milk Accelerator program. So thrilled to have you, Bob. And last but not least, of course, John Crawford is the VP of Client Insights at IRI, where he has developed IRI's industry-leading dairy thought leadership program and leads the relationship for a number of top dairy clients. So welcome, everyone.
Thank you.
Dr. Slimko, let me start with you. Consumers want to optimize their health and their lives, so sparking the desire for functional foods that we just were chatting about on the other panel. Can you share your point of view on the role of dairy in this quest for optimization?
Sure. Thanks a lot for having me here today. It's very exciting. I enjoyed the other panel. So much to learn about dairy and where we're going. And, looking at the Hartman Group data too, we know Americans are approaching health and wellness as a pursuit of holistic well-being and deepening their focus on both physical and mental resilience. And we also know through this pandemic that we've changed our behaviors, looking at, and the consumer perception has shifted. And these routines related to health and wellness are leaving consumers more attuned to the importance of resilience and health in this space of change. So I'd say today, the interesting part is being a dietitian and working in industry, that shift is also including this mind, body, and spirit, in addition to looking at nutrition. And so, really thinking what are they looking for? And they're looking for these solutions in functional foods. So let's first talk about what functional foods are. There isn't an accepted FDA definition for them. However, they do regulate those claims on packaged foods. And in a sense, most foods are recommended by the dietary guidelines for Americans can be considered functional foods, since the accepted definition is that they provide health benefits beyond their nutritional value. And that's exactly what the dietary guidelines state about following the healthy dietary eating patterns they recommend, all of which include dairy. It's a really long plethora of science that they reviewed, but I love talking about it because the actual language in the dietary guidelines talks about consistent evidence demonstrates that a healthy dietary pattern is associated with beneficial outcomes for all-cause mortality, cardiovascular disease, overweight and obesity, type 2 diabetes, bone health, and some cancers. So again, you talk about opportunity and where the science is and where that's reviewed. A lot of these functional benefits that we can look at, we know we can meet these consumer demands.
Very cool. And Bob, I know that you're an advocate for California dairy all around the world. Consumers, as we just discussed, are increasingly scrutinizing their nutritional intake. So how do you see that benefiting dairy overall?
Well, Fred, I think really when it comes down to it, milk is nature's perfect food, and it's designed inherently to grow and sustain life. And consumers all over the world recognize this. I was in Vietnam a couple of years ago, and there was a billboard just as I was leaving the airport that was actually, I found out, sponsored by the government, encouraging kids to drink more milk. And they recognize that there's an undernourishment problem, that their kids actually aren't the same height as neighboring countries' kids. And so they know that milk is a great and important and essential part of the solution. In China, throughout the pandemic, doctors were encouraging consumers to drink more milk. And it was endorsed by the government, really, with this idea of building immunity. And, as we look at the growth potential, it's not just the U.S., it's also a global potential. I mean, the deficit of milk projected consumption versus what can inherently be produced in Asia is going to be 9 billion pounds in less than 10 years. I mean, about a 30% growth. So there's huge opportunity globally is the summary.
Yeah. I love it. So John, IRI is the leading provider of big data and predictive analytics, as well as forward-looking insights. You guys work with CPG and retail. What are you seeing from the research lens in the functional space in terms of trends and demand?
Yeah, I think when we start any conversation at the moment, we need to think about, what kind of happened during COVID, right? I think that I always kind of go back to that and then try and figure out, okay, where are we today? And so if you think about what happened during COVID, right, it was interesting. A lot of people started to eat at home when they had to, right? People weren't eating out. Millennials started to learn how to cook. They had to do that. Processed foods started to rise, right? So we saw margarine and processed cheese grow for the first time in like 5 years. And you started to see, obviously people working from home, school from home, which hurt the yogurt category, right? The yogurt category did not see the renaissance that the other dairy categories saw because it's so heavily single serve. You saw convenience stores decline, right, as people weren't traveling, and you saw e-commerce increase, and grocery saw some benefits. So now kind of coming out of COVID, what are we seeing, right? And what we're seeing is that 49% of consumers are going to wash their hands more frequently coming out of the pandemic, or more thoroughly. So that's good. People are going to be using hand sanitizer still. Okay, great. But 27% are going to focus more on their health. 16% are going to buy more products that support immunity that we just talked about, right? 21% need to get more sleep, and 16% are going to practice more mindfulness or meditation, right? So the question that I kind of had, coming out of this is, what would stick and what wouldn't stick. And I always, I like to say, when we were in the middle of the pandemic, I thought to myself, okay, is this going to be like other recessions in the past or not? Or are consumers going to be, so like past recessions where consumers just kind of forgot, right? Pretty quickly, we forgot 2008. Pretty quickly, we forgot 1991, right? Or is this going to be like the Great Depression, where my grandparents pinched pennies for their entire lives, right? And I originally thought we were going to probably be, somewhere in between, maybe have a little more lasting impact. Now that we've kind of come out of it, I don't know, right? I think, boy, we are forgetting awfully quickly, right? I mean, California just opened up, and the Dodgers already sold out. Had the biggest, crowd of any sporting event, right, since the pandemic. So I think we forget pretty quickly, and even in California. But it is interesting to see what claims kind of grew and are growing right now. And the claims that are growing are free from claims. So I know we don't want to talk about too much about free from, but unsweetened, low, no carb, low net carbs, no soy is interesting. That's a new claim that we've kind of been seeing a lot more of. No soy, unsweetened, no sugar, dairy free, unfortunately, lactose free as well. Their dietary claims, right? Vegan, vegetarian have been increasing. Non-GMO has been increasing. Their animal well-being and animal feed claims. So pasture raised is up 16%. Grass-fed diets up 11%. And then interestingly enough, and this is across the whole store, and we'll talk dairy later, but organic claims only up 3%. Protein claims only up 4%. And fiber claims are only up 2%. So I think there's some opportunity for claims that dairy can make that are not being made right now.
Super interesting. I think my takeaway as a non sort of expert in this space, and this is going to go to you, Michelle, is it can be very overwhelming as a consumer. Do I want soy? Do I not want soy? Do I need protein added in? Like, what's enough? What's too much? How do you kind of combat this, or how does an everyday consumer separate sort of the right nutritional signal from all this noise?
I love this question. I think we are living in a sea of information and inundated. I have teenagers at home, and trying to keep up with them and all the various media and TikTok dances, I can't keep up. But trends and misconceptions can really get the best of all of us. I think really one thing to think about, we are all think about how to keep our lives healthy and how to separate that signal versus the noise is really important. I think the signal is important to think about what's important to yourself, what you've talked about with your healthcare provider, and what's really important to you. And then the noise is all these other surround sound that try to sift through. Obviously, probably biased, as a scientist, but I would use science as that, that compass to really say, what is the science saying? Where is that going in terms of health and wellness, and how do I interpret that? And for example, going back to the dietary guidelines, the backbone of some of these trends and some of these fads really align with some of the dietary patterns that are highlighted in the dietary guidelines in terms of these popular and trendy diets, from the Mediterranean diet, DASH diet, and vegetarian and flexitarian. And each of these eating patterns include daily dairy recommendations. My advice for people who are trying to, sift through this too, have to remember to be human, allow yourself to be flexible, and not feel so rigid on like choosing or, not choosing one food over the other. Again, as a dietitian, really important to drive the message to eat a variety of foods from the food groups, choosing more nutrient-rich foods most often, and being mindful of total calories, added sugar, saturated fat, and sodium. I love the content earlier, the idea of permissible indulgence, really important too. There's definitely room for fuller fat and nutrient-rich foods within these healthy eating patterns. And being physically active, let's not forget how important that is to the total balance. I'll probably leave with 3 questions, to ask ourselves in terms of sifting through that noise. I'd suggest consumers, does it sound too good to be true? Something dad taught me? Well, it probably is. So really think about that. The second one is, how is it hitting your pocket? What's the financial cost? Some of these things are popping up so many different ways, from apps to books to services. And lastly, thinking about how does it exclude an entire food group or other food groups? I think that's important. If the answer is yes to all 3 of those, might want to run the other direction or think about differently what's important to your health. Always a registered dietitian to talk to, or your healthcare team, but really important, just, kind of 3 questions to think about how to wade through that.
That's great. Thank you. So Bob, we're on year 3 of our innovation journey together, and we've seen everything I can think of, I think, although I have a new one to show you in terms of applications, but we've seen some things that were mentioned today: upcycled berry shakes, putting vegetables in ice cream, carbonized milk. We've seen a whole bunch. What role do you think innovation plays in coordination with dairy to help us optimize our health?
Yeah, one of the things I've learned, Fred, over this last 3-year journey is not to answer a question like this too narrowly, because I think some of the things that part of the beauty of this is really having innovators, entrepreneurs, people thinking about things differently, bring different ideas that I could have never thought of. I also, Michelle, thinking about something my father taught me when I was a young Boy Scout learning to build a fire. My dad said, hey, you need heat, fuel, and oxygen, right? And I think of, oxygen's like the environment we're in, and fuel could be anything from resources, whether that be people but the spark and the heat to me is like what the entrepreneurs, what the innovators bring. And when we think about this area of optimizing our health, I mean, it could come from anywhere, Fred. We've seen it, right? Like this could be a university professor or researcher bringing some really cool new application of research or science. It could be a recent college grad who took one of those professors' courses, who has a whole different worldview and a different lens and a heck of a lot of fire in their belly to go make something happen. Or it could be a mom who is solving a problem for their kids that has a realization that, hey, this is probably a bigger problem and this solution could help a lot of other people. And I think that's really the beauty of these sort of programs focused around innovation.
Yeah, it is very interesting to see where the ideas come from, and it's the best ones, the most disruptive ones are very rarely from where you would expect them to be. So I'm actually going to go to you, Michelle. One of the things I thought about when we first started talking about this panel and this idea is that elite athletes used to be the ones that were focused on performance and recovery, right? You'd always heard they needed to sleep better and, how do they optimize and score one more point, lift one more weight. But now we're realizing that there's really a true benefit to calm and sleep and stress relief for all of us. Are there any advancements in what I call recovery from a dairy perspective that have you excited?
Yeah, thanks for that question. I think right now in the role that I'm in also, these are new and emerging areas for National Dairy Council that we continue to dig deeper in. And I think your point is perfectly said. It's moving from elite athletes to the general consumer who's looking at how to look at their food in that total package in terms of how it hits mind, body, physical, sleep, calming, etc. And I can tell you about eating a healthy diet includes dairy as part of this holistic approach. Not only gives us the fuel to perform throughout the day, but gives us the nutrients and benefits to help us recover at rest. Plus, we've also thought about and done, a warm glass of milk or a warm milk-based beverage before bed can kind of help you get in the right mindset for bedtime and restful sleep. But there's probably 3 areas in this area of recovery that I think we're really focusing in on more, and that's inflammation, immunity, and gut health. And despite common misperceptions, dairy foods actually play a role in all 3. The thing about inflammation that's concerning, it's one of those things that's like you don't wear it outside on your body. It's what's happening internally, which makes it kind of something to watch because it's silent and increases your risk for cardiovascular disease and type 2 diabetes. However, the upside is there are simple ways to combat, chronic inflammation. Again, back to kindergarten kind of lessons, but lifestyle choices like not smoking, stress management, regular exercise, getting a good night's sleep, and maintaining a healthy weight and diet can all help. But what's new and emerging, one of our scientists also dug into this, but research has consistently shown that milk, cheese, and yogurt do not cause inflammation, and some studies have actually shown that dairy foods may even be beneficial in reducing chronic inflammation. Consuming that recommended servings of dairy for adults, that's 3 servings a day that may help lower inflammation. When we think about immunity, the immunity system is the body's Department of Defense, protecting the body. And immunity and nutrition are definitely interconnected. And the nutrients of dairy foods play an important role in immunity. So really teasing those out and thinking about how milk provides vitamin A, D, protein, zinc, and selenium. And gut health, digestive health is another, the 3rd area that I think a focus area that we're looking at. And I think, in terms of the intestinal tract, that's one that continues to have a body of science and contains the largest number of immune cells in the body. So we want to make sure we keep that healthy. And for eating fermented foods with live and active cultures is important to gut health because they interact with the microbiota and intestinal cells. There's really good evidence on how fermented dairy foods like yogurt with live cultures and cheeses and kefir can benefit gut health. Fermented dairy foods can help maintain gut barrier function and have unique bioactives due to their process. And then also there's other areas of gut health for lactose intolerance and looking at yogurt and hard cheeses that can often be tolerated because there's less lactose in those hard cheeses. So again, those are kind of the 3 areas and highlight that NDC is exploring further.
It's super interesting. Obviously, there's a lot of research in there. John, from your point of view, you're obviously seeing all sorts of research. From a recovery standpoint, is anything sort of jumping off the page at you as a category or area of interest?
Well, in terms of recovery, I think it's interesting just to kind of, when we start to talk about dairy and looking at the Dairy 15, how we kind of coined it, where we kind of expanded to include ice cream and frozen novelties and refrigerated desserts, as Donna kind of mentioned, refrigerated dips and some other categories. It is interesting to see what has popped in terms of claims within dairy. And I mean, it's the same things, right? It's no less carbs, net carbs, right? That's up the most. It's grass fed. It's vegan. It's non-GMO. But it's interesting to see, the digestive claims are only up 6%, right? So there's an opportunity that's being missed. Now that could be a component of yogurt not having done really particularly well this past year, but organic claims in dairy is up 4%. Antioxidants are up 4%, and something like calcium, right, is only up 3%, and protein's only up 2% in dairy. And so I've talked about this to the dairy industry for quite some time, and I know Elizabeth said, you don't need to spell it out because consumers are researching these things. And she's right, but she's also, I think there's an opportunity being missed, right? I've talked to dairy quite a bit about, if you're not telling consumers that dairy is a good source of calcium and protein and vitamin D, do they know? And I think the answer, I believe, is no. And particularly younger consumers don't know, who didn't grow up on all of the research that kind of came through with milk and with dairy. So I would say, think about what a Fairlife has done, right? In terms of they're really communicating on that package, their message: lower sugar, higher protein, high lactose free, right? So benefit there, extended shelf life. You think about some of the things Fairlife has done, and Fairlife is now, growing in milk, they're growing in ice cream, right? They're growing in coffee creamers, right? They've extended this out. And so it's a real message that I think gets missed in the dairy industry, is some of this low hanging fruit and communicating just these low hanging benefits. So I would say, I always, Bob's probably tired of hearing me say this, right? You think of a gallon of milk and you think about a little teeny sticker on a gallon of milk and all that space that's wasted in some kind of communication, right? And think about how Fairlife wrapped that new bottle, right? And that entire carton is now a billboard for them to be able to communicate all the benefits. I just think there's a huge opportunity missed to communicate the inherent benefits that we've been talking about here to consumers that may or may not know. And I think the younger consumers really don't know all the great benefits of dairy.
I'm hoping one of these days, Bob and I can tackle packaging in the dairy industry. I feel like, as an ex-marketing guy, there's definitely a lot of real estate on that milk carton. But let me ask you this, John, to stick with you on what's popping. We talked about recovery a little bit. Can you talk about the other side, the performance side of things? Is there anything that's sort of jumping off the page to you in terms of benefits or areas of opportunity, thinking about more like optimization and performance?
Well, I would say, I think we talked about it to some extent, right? So what role does protein play in diets? And we know that protein has been proliferating throughout the entire store, right? We know that grains are being, kind of proliferating throughout the store. So I guess the question becomes kind of how do you make these things play together and how do you communicate it, right? I know that, you think about, I go back to Fairlife or, with their protein milk, their higher protein milk, again, communicating those benefits. I see an interesting product coming up from Land O'Lakes. We talked about this a little bit before. It's a seed butter that includes hemp seed, chia seeds, and what was the other seed in there? I can't remember. Excuse me. But anyways, they include flax seed, right? And so now they're putting seeds in their butter, and what are those benefits? So I think that from a recovery standpoint, I mean, I'm not seeing the communication in dairy that I think could be out there. A few years back, Milk Pep put a commercial out there for the U.S. women's national team and Kelly O'Hara on chocolate milk and the recovery and the great benefits of recovery of chocolate milk, right? So I do think there's more opportunity to communicate that than probably we're seeing, on package for sure.
That's super interesting. One of the questions that came through from the audience here is, can you talk about the hydrating benefits of milk, which ties into the U.S. National team spot. And I remember, I think it was Michael Phelps. It was all of a sudden organically, people realized that Olympic athletes were drinking chocolate milk at one of the games, maybe 2 games ago. And I know that there's been a lot of advancements there. Does anyone want to talk to that? Because the question was, can you talk about the hydrating benefits of milk? And I just look for any excuse to drink more chocolate milk. So if you guys can give me an excuse to do that, I'm in. Maybe Dr. Slimko, do you have any thoughts on the hydration side?
Yeah, I think that's right. I think we did research and looking at the electrolyte profile of milk in terms of potassium, sodium, and recovery. Again, protein, high quality protein. Again, and also composition of water in milk in and of itself. I think so. It serves as a good post-recovery, beverage after exercise.
Yeah. And Bob, do you have any thoughts on that? I know you guys have worked with lots of athletes in all different sports and levels of professionalism. But any thoughts on the sort of hydration and athletic recovery piece of it?
Yeah, Fred, just recently we've been working with the chief dietitian for the San Francisco 49ers, as well as their head athletic trainer. And a couple areas that they really highlighted. And we have some great resources here too, with some recipes they've developed, high protein pancakes even. But they talk about milk as a complete nutrient package, and this idea that one glass of milk, really any type of milk, whether it's whole milk, I think whole milk for me is certainly my favorite. It's kind of milk as it was intended to be, but one glass provides 3 out of 4 nutrients that are underconsumed by the majority of Americans and many athletes, and that's calcium, vitamin D, and potassium. And so, here is a super affordable, wonderful, complete nutrition package that, top performance athletic trainers and dietitians are really encouraging their athletes to consume more. And even, nighttime feeding, this idea that are, for not just athletes, but also for us, the few of us who get, we walk a few miles at night, right? And that's our exercise. But our muscles are rebuilt and repaired even while we sleep. So this idea of consuming proteins before bed and the amino acids, the leucine in dairy, the whey and casein proteins before bed that dairy provides, even cottage cheese, provides this great combination of whey and casein. So there's so many good dairy products that are perfect for performance and recovery, not just of elite athletes, but for those of us who are kind of the less than elite athletes, let's say.
So you have to forgive me for laughing. One of the questions that just came in was, when will we be dumping a cooler of milk on the victorious coach at the edge of the field during sporting events? That's from Joel Hastings. I love that he jumped off being a panel to being the comedy relief from the audience. So our sort of headline for this and Venture Fuel's tagline is "What's next now?" The idea of the future is here. I'd like to kind of end with each of you sharing something that you're very excited about, whether that is a piece of research, whether that is a new product, or something you see happening in the very near future. John, we could start with you.
So I think the hydrating benefits is a very important one, right? You just think about where milk in particular has lost some volume to, right? Bottled water, whether it's sports drinks, right? Whatever it might be. It hadn't just lost it to plant-based. We know that for sure. And it hasn't just lost it because of cereal consumption being down, right? But if you think about the hydrating benefits and the size of the water category, or the size of the sports drinks category, the size of the energy drink category, right? It's a top 10 category within MULO plus convenience. Energy drinks are a top 10 category. So you think about the size of those. That's what I guess I'm excited about. I'm excited about the possibilities for milk and for dairy, but the possibilities, the low hanging fruit of communicating the benefits, right? And the ability to kind of counter some of all of the, the negative publicity that's out there. And, you hear Dr. Simcoe talk about it, and you're like, okay, well, wait a minute. Why do we have to hear all the negative connotations about it? But, the reality is plant-based is still growing, right? And consumers are still looking for it. And I think cheese is probably the next category that people better be paying attention to. I know Donna talked about, low fat and cheese don't go together, and plant-based and cheese should not go together either, but it's going to improve. And then start to think about where is technology going with folks kind of manufacturing dairy proteins. I think that'll be a really interesting dynamic that we have to kind of pay attention to.
Thank you very much. All right, so Dr. Slimko, 15 second answer, because we're going to try and get everyone out of here.
Okay. Real quick, I'm probably just most excited about dairy being presented as the total package from both an environmental and nutrition perspective, connecting with Gen Z and this new consumer, and continuing to deliver on taste, convenience, and also that there's going to be a dairy for everybody. As you can hear, there's a choice for everyone. I think that's exciting, and to kind of see that reinvigorated.
Great. And Bob, what about you?
Well, I'll make it really quick, Fred, because I'm excited to see something that I could have never dreamed of on my own. So I can't even imagine what the answer is, and that's what's exciting to me about what the potential holds for us here.
That is an awesome setup. So thank you all for joining us. I hope this sparked creative ideas for everyone watching. And in terms of the competition, if you go to Real CA Milk Accelerator, and it's spelled EXCELERATOR.com. It's also should be on the screen for you to click on. Submit any ideas that you have for new dairy products, or if you want to pass this on to somebody that you know has been working on something or has a new product on the market. We have over $650,000 of non-dilutive prizing and awards that are available, and the applications are open through midnight this Friday. So get them in. We're at the last moments of considering who will become part of the program, but thank you to all the panelists. It's been a great honor to learn from everybody, and thank you all for joining us.